grabbed the cleanest shirt from my closet, and right before I hit record, what did I do? I spilled water all over myself like an idiot. Nonetheless, today we're going to be talking about 3 fantasy football players that are skyrocketing in value. Their value is going all the way up, and we're going to be talking about it. If you're new here and you like fantasy football content, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll give you a couple seconds to do it. I won't rush you. Are you good? Alright, cool. Roll the intro. Our first player skyrocketing in fantasy football value is none other than Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals, who's currently the RB28 on Underdog and has gone up over 6 spots in ADP since just last week. Though I am a fan of Chase Brown, the prospect itself, this feels more like people are overestimating how Zach Moss missed the preseason last week due to an illness, which is likely or almost definitely not going to carry over and affect his fantasy value in the 2024 season. Mind you, Zach Moss, the backup, or really the RB1 on the depth chart, is being taken after Chase Brown. So I think at this point that may be the better play to take, is to take the RB with the lower ADP, somebody that you may be able to wait half of a round on or maybe even a full round on and take advantage of the value that comes with a back like Zach Moss. As for Chase Brown, of course, what we know about young running backs is typically if they're not taking with a high draft capital, there's a really, really long shot pathway for them to being that top 25 value in fantasy right away. Chase Brown last year was a 5th round pick, so that's not really much capital or much of a deterrence to tell us that Chase Brown is the franchise back. This is somebody that they're going to lean on, and they're just going to, have Zach Moss fall to the wayside this year. That's probably not going to happen. As I previously hit on before, this feels like we're kind of anointing Chase Brown to take a step in a direction that we're not really even too sure that he's ready to take that next step leap in terms of like fantasy football rankings or tiers of running backs at least. But what we know about Zach Moss, and keep in mind both Zach Moss and Chase Brown are listed at 5'9", and Chase Brown has maybe 10 pounds on him or so compared to Zach Moss, who's 10 pounds lighter. Zach Moss, in a larger sample size, has a higher yard per carry in his career than Chase Brown already. He's not a better pass catcher than Chase Brown in terms of yards per reception, as we saw Chase Brown was very effective in the passing game last year in that very minimal sample size role that we did see. But in terms of replacing Joe Mixon and his high efficiency in the red zone, Joe Mixon was the 4th best running back in fantasy, PPR of course, in terms of red zone volume and scoring in the red zone. So when the ball gets to the 20-yard line and in, Joe Mixon was the 4th best. He had 55 carries inside the 20 last season and had 10 total touchdowns to go along with that. So one of these two is going to have to fill that void, and we've seen Zach Moss be a better goal line or red zone package back in his career so far. So that would lead me to believe that a lot of that volume, if not all of it, is probably going to end up going to Zach Moss. While Chase Brown may be more in line to play some of the early down snaps or the passing down situations, the bulk and the meat and the potatoes of the points for this offense are going to be when you score rushing touchdowns, and it feels like Zach Moss is a little more qualified at this point to get that job done in terms of replacing the volume that Joe Mixon has brought them last year and in seasons prior. What we also know about Zach Moss is that typically, at least in the last 2 seasons, 10 or more running backs who are in their 5th year or later crack the top 25. So we can kind of rule out that Chase Brown has a, nice shot at making it into that top 25, given that he's a 2nd-year player, whereas Zach Moss is going into his 5th season, so he fits that mold and fits that percentile and category of fantasy football running backs that finish top 25. If I'm personally going to be drafting wide receivers heavy and I need to come back around and get an RB2 or even bolster up my running back depth, I would feel a lot more comfortable in trusting the guy who's going to be out there when the ball gets into the red zone for their team than somebody who like Chase Brown, though in PPR, of course, having those receptions is great, but the touchdowns are even better for a running back. Like I said, somebody has to fill this void that Joe Mixon did provide, that stability in terms of once they got to the red zone, they can lean on him to score touchdowns, as he had 10 total touchdowns in 2024. Sure, Zach Moss probably won't have all of those red zone carries. He'll probably end up with most of them, so I'm not really too sure that I want to reach for the running back going before Zach Moss when I can wait and get somebody that I trust more in goal-to-go or red zone packages like a Zach Moss. Chase Brown looks promising, and like I said, I am a fan of him as a prospect, but I feel that in year 2, this is a little bit of a pricey price tag to put on somebody who hasn't really shown us a lot in his rookie season to say we should be trusting him to be the starting running back full-time going forward. This is probably going to end up being a split backfield. The second player skyrocketing in fantasy football value this season is Rashee Rice, who on Underdog is the wide receiver 32, and his ADP over the last week or so has gone up almost half of a round. So that's just right under 6 spots in terms of ADP. And I think we should even be reaching for him even sooner than he already is going, and I'll tell you why. What we know about Rashee Rice is that he was one of Mahomes' go-to weapons last season and already has started to build a chemistry with his Hall of Fame quarterback. He only had 19 less targets than Travis Kelce, so that's something to keep in mind of. Of course, now we're adding Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown to the mix, but given the news that Hollywood Brown is probably going to miss in between 4 to 6 weeks, let's just round about and say that that'll end up being 3 games or maybe even 4 games missed, because obviously the season hasn't started yet. That is giving somebody like Rashee Rice an opportunity to build an even better rapport than he already has with Patrick Mahomes, his quarterback. I personally was somebody that was a big fan of grabbing Hollywood Brown, and I understand they also added Xavier Worthy in the draft. I don't think this really affects too much of where I would either rank or draft somebody like Hollywood Brown, because I'm still going to get him for a bulk of the season. Rashee Rice, for a rookie, has put up elite metrics last year in 2023, and that's something that I don't expect to just stop in 2024, given that there's more wide receivers added to the offense. Last season, Rashee Rice was 10th among all wide receivers in yards per route run. So that's putting him over guys that are being drafted in front of him, like a Deebo Samuel, like a Mike Evans, or even a DJ Moore. Rashee Rice had more yards per route run in his first season than these guys, which is extremely impressive no matter what offensive scenario you're in. And I think my favorite stat to emphasize how great Rashee Rice was in his rookie season last year is that he had 40 less receptions than Tyreek Hill, but had 2 more yards after the catch than Tyreek Hill, who is the consensus wide receiver 1 this season. That, to me, shows how impressive and how explosive Rashee Rice can be once he gets the ball and goes in the open field. Those 3, maybe even 4 games, let's just say, that Hollywood Brown could wind up missing for the Chiefs offense, that could be a bump in target share for somebody like Rashee Rice. It could also be a bump for somebody like Travis Kelce, but we're giving the opportunity for a connection and a chemistry that was already strong last year to potentially get even better before Marquise Brown or Hollywood Brown steps back onto the field in the 2024 season. This makes me want to reach ahead and take Rashee Rice even earlier than what he's actually going. We know he's on a really good offensive team for fantasy. We know that he's probably not going to out-target Travis Kelce, but even being the number 2 guy in an offense that you know is going to produce for fantasy, why wouldn't you want to reach for him? Why wouldn't you want to take the opportunity to make sure that you land a player like Rashee Rice? And the last player skyrocketing in value, again, this probably has to do more with the preseason buzz and the training camp news that's been coming out, but Braelon Allen is the running back 55 on Underdog and has increased in almost 11 spots on Underdog's ADP. Considering Allen's cheap ADP price tag, he's definitely worth a consideration in terms of stashing, and it's going to be for more than just being a handcuff to Breece Hall. I believe that Braelon Allen has a chance to be the thorn in the side of Breece Hall fantasy owners, and it's not because of the camp reports. It's not because of what I've seen in preseason. It's because he is the perfect counterpart for somebody like Breece Hall, who can do it all. And yeah, that rhymed, but I wasn't really trying to go for that. Last season, even though Breece Hall was on a snap count early on, he finished out the season playing 59% of his team's snaps, and did see 2 games where he did exceed 75% of the snaps or more. But one of those weeks came when they already released Dalvin Cook, so they really had nobody else to put out there in terms of getting a change of pace back for Breece Hall. If you remember early in the season, and even when Breece Hall was going off and was the clear second best running back behind Christian McCaffrey, they were still rolling out Dalvin Cook a good amount of times. And being that the backfield was pretty split up last season, I could definitely see Braelon Allen eating into Breece Hall's workhorse running back volume this year. And that would be something that I'm worried about in terms of, can Breece Hall reach his RB1 status? Can he reach that ceiling of being the best overall running back if something were to, God forbid, happen to Christian McCaffrey? I'm really not sure at this point from what I've seen and what I've heard from Braelon Allen. If Hall is going to play around 59-60% of the snaps, and Braelon Allen is getting close to 40% of those snaps, given that he is a versatile receiver and is great running in between the tackles as a downhill style runner, he is a great change of pace back for somebody like Breece Hall, like I said, who really doesn't have any flaws in his game and is an absolute speed demon once he gets out into the open field. This news doesn't really affect how soon or how late I would take Breece Hall, but now seeing that the opportunity for the perfect complementary piece is now here for the Jets, if I had the choice between Bijan and Breece Hall, I would lean slightly towards Bijan, even though Bijan Robinson has a equal counterpart as well in Tyler Algier. I think the potential of what Braelon Allen could add to the Jets' offense could hinder how good or how high Breece Hall could finish this season. So I see him as more than just your regular handcuff back that goes in this RB50, RB60 range. And like I just mentioned, his ADP of being in that in-between RB50, RB60, that's where most of the handcuffs are going to go. And at least we know the floor value for somebody like Braelon Allen is he's guaranteed to be the handcuff. There's probably not going to be anyone else fighting for these snaps in the offense. I don't see Isaiah Davis or Izzy Ibataconda fighting for that RB2 spot before Braelon Allen, because Braelon Allen is much more talented than these guys. However, I believe that his floor could be even more than just a handcuff running back. I could see in a PPR format, his receptions and catches out of the backfield could be very valuable in fantasy. So I'm not saying that he's going to be somebody that's going to start in your lineup all the time, but I think his floor and worst case scenario is still somebody that's just better than a handcuff. Most of these guys you take around this point in the draft are going to be coming with their own question marks, or they're just going to be handcuffs. But this is somebody that actually could fight for meaningful playing time during the season. Given all that I just said, I think if you play in a PPR format, it's definitely worth taking a late round flyer on somebody like Braelon Allen. He was somebody that was supposed to be drafted a lot sooner, but was injured with an elbow injury, so I'm not sure why that would impact draft capital. An elbow injury is not something that would last for a career or be something that's potentially career ending. But, lucky for the Jets, he fell in the draft. The Jets were not silly about it. They jumped on the opportunity to take a player like this. And I think if you add this player to your fantasy teams this season, you might be pleasantly surprised with how that could possibly end up. So those are my 3 players that are skyrocketing this year in fantasy football. If you like fantasy football content like this, feel free to hit the like button. I would really appreciate that. It would help my videos get out to more and more fantasy football viewers. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate you all taking the time to watch and sit through this entire video. If you did, of course. If you clicked off, then you ain't seeing this, and I don't really care about you, to be honest. But anyways, my name is Turtle. I'm signing out, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Peace.